sit down. Today we have the privilege of sitting with Mr. Alfredo Altavilla, an experienced executive who is now the special advisor for BYD in Europe. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here with Elio, part of our business team. Mr. Alfredo Altavilla, thank you for joining us. Could you maybe just give us a bit of a rundown on your career and maybe your current position as well?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks very much for hosting me, and it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm an old turkey in the automotive industry. I've been more than 30 years with Fiat and then Fiat Chrysler in a number of positions. I've been the CEO of Iveco, the truck company of Fiat Powertrain Technology, and then Tofaş, the joint venture we have in Turkey, and then the last stint, 6 years, I've been the chief operating officer of Fiat Chrysler for the all EMEA region. During the last 15 years, fundamentally from the day in which Sergio Marchionne became the CEO of Fiat, I've also been in charge of M&A for the whole Fiat group. So got the if you wish, the privilege to have two jobs at the same time, an operational one, being the CEO of one of the sectors, and a more strategic one with the M&A. After I left FCA, I became the senior advisor for CVC, the largest European private equity fund, and then the former Prime Minister Draghi asked me to become the executive chairman of ITA Airways, the new Alitalia, if you wish. And after leaving ITA Airways in 2022, I went back to private equity, always with CVC, and since few months, the BYD leadership, Chairman Wang and Stella Li, asked me to be their special advisor for Europe to fundamentally nurture the BYD business in this region. As you well know, BYD is a giant in China, but it was almost a startup in Europe, and so we had to fundamentally lay the foundations for further expansion of the business here.
Wow, I mean, the introduction I think says it all.
Yeah, Mr. Altavilla, it was a really insightful things you said, and also a great career. And I wanted to ask you, what made you chose to work for BYD?
Well, it's an interesting challenge, and actually, at the beginning I thought it would have been an interesting challenge. Now I realize that it could be sort of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, in the sense that it doesn't happen very often that a large company like BYD is in China, I mean, under $100 billion turnover in China, more than 1 million employees, and one of the largest R&D center across the world. At the same time, is so big in China, in the home market, and it's a startup in another region of the world. And so from a managerial standpoint, and from a personal standpoint, there's a lot of interest in setting up the business in Europe. Just to give you a hint, when I started working for BYD in Europe, we were selling in Italy 150 cars per month. This month we should be selling 2,000, so we have grown by 10 times in 5 months. And the same ratio is applicable throughout Europe. By the end of 2025, we will have something like 800 dealerships in Europe, one plant in operation in Hungary and one under construction in Turkey, with a total production capacity of almost 500,000 cars a year. So I mean, in such a short period of time, it would have been almost impossible to have the same experience with any other OEM in the world. and I think that when you actually go to Shenzhen and visit BYD, you realize that BYD is truly one of a kind in the car business today.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Mr.
for sure.
Altavilla. Yeah.
But maybe like you say you kind of accepted this also for the challenge and the opportunity would be. Maybe I'm interested in knowing what's maybe been your maybe biggest challenge or the thing that's taken a lot of courage to do, or even what was the most fun maybe from some aspect.
If you wish, the two things coincide. The real challenge, which is also the real fun, is to get our Chinese colleagues to get used to engineer cars for European needs and European consumer taste. When you go to China, the maximum speed on the Chinese highways is between 80 and 90 kilometers an hour. There's no European that will ever drive a car on the highway at 80 kilometers an hour. And the behavior of a car is completely different at 80 kilometers an hour and at 200 kilometers an hour. And so what I'm trying to do is to teach our Chinese colleagues the way in which European cars need to behave on the road, and what kind of features are more appealing to European customers versus the Chinese ones. And this is a very interesting activity, and it's taking a lot of time, but results are very encouraging. Also because BYD has a tremendous speed in adapting the features of its products to other regional needs and tastes.
Of course. And I mean, I saw that you guys are opening two manufacturing companies in Hungary and Turkey. And then recently, either yesterday or today, an article came out about searching for some Italian suppliers and some challenges in doing that, and some meetings coming up. Would you like to?
Yeah, that was my idea. Look, I think that the strategy that Chairman Wang and Stella Ali had of establishing manufacturing operations throughout the world, instead of relying just on the pure export out of China, is the right one. But in order to be perceived as real in the different jurisdictions, it needs to be accompanied by local sourcing. And so BYD needs to involve local suppliers in order to reach the highest possible local content. And this is also to avoid the risk of the tariffs that have been imposed in certain regions. And so when it comes to Europe, we discussed with Stella Lee and agreed that since Italy, as one of the most important supplier base in Europe, very cost competitive and with a lot of expertise and know-how, and at the same time, because of the huge volume reduction that the national OEM Stellantis is experiencing, Italian suppliers are very eager to find new customers, and that was the reason to fundamentally try to get together with BYD and see if there's any space for Italian companies to cooperate with BYD in Hungary and Turkey.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Altavilla. I have one question about BYD's identity here in Europe, because I think it's still perceived as a wholly Chinese company. However, do you think that developing now in Europe can give it another identity, maybe with the Italian culture?
Well, it must give a different identity, because frankly speaking, I don't think that BYD's ambition is to be identified 10 years from now as a pure Chinese company. Also because, and I think that we need to be absolutely transparent, sometimes here in Europe, Chinese companies are not perceived as high quality,
Yeah.
high image kind of product and companies. And so the ultimate objective is to try and develop BYD into a real global player. And fundamentally, BYD will be a global player 2 years from now. BYD has opened up a plant in Mexico, is opening up a plant in Brazil, the one in Hungary, there's one in Thailand which became operational last year, the one in Turkey. So it is truly a global company, and I think that we need to give BYD regional cultural hints, region by region. I don't think that it will be right for BYD to lose the Chinese identity to get just the Italian one, for instance. That's not the purpose. We would like BYD to be perceived as a truly global company.
And what do you think it may be like the biggest asset for BYD to grow? Is it like technology or the management?
Look, BYD defines itself as a tech company, not as a car company. And in order to explain that sentence, you have to consider that the BYD has 103,000 engineers. The second largest car manufacturer in terms of R&D is Toyota, which has 52,000 engineers. So 50% of what BYD has gotten. So in itself, that difference explains everything. Then, a company with 103,000 engineers and 1 million employees without a mindful, experienced, and aggressive management will do absolutely nothing. So to answer your question is technology comes first, and management is, of course, very important to exploit at best the technology that is sitting inside the company.
Then I have a follow-up question about what do you mean by aggressive management? What is kind of like your take on it?
But look, Stefania, the answer is clear. The automotive business is very straightforward, although people think that it's very complicated. It's not. There are very simple rules to run a car company. The worldwide automotive market in Europe is made of 90 to 92, 93 million cars sold every year. This number is not going to grow much in the next 5 years. BYD was selling 1.2 million cars in 2022, which became 2.6 in 23 and 4.2 million in 24. If BYD keeps on growing like this and the overall market stays the same, 5 years from now, this means that the minimum one or two European or American OEMs will be killed in this process. In order to do this, you gotta be aggressive. You need to have an aggressive strategy, and actually, I mean, we can argue until we get blue in the face, but BYD has already 4 brands in China, has launched the BYD brand in Europe, and the next April here in Milan, we will introduce the premium brand from BYD, Denza. And then in 2026, we will introduce also Yangwang, which is the luxury brand for BYD. If this is not aggressive, I don't know what aggressive could possibly mean.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense. And I can see from maybe like your reaction that you quite enjoy it. I think maybe would you like to share some like more managerial aspects or even something more financial that maybe also Bocconi students might be interested in from learning from you as well?
Look, the one thing that makes BYD different from any other OEM from a financial standpoint is the fact that although BYD is listed, uh, BYD does not have any short-term objective. Chairman Wang doesn't give a shit about earning calls with the analyst. He keeps on repeating that BYD has long-term objective, that of course might have a different deployment when it comes to quarterly forecast. And so this long-term view from a financial standpoint means that, I'll give you an example, differently from any other OEM, BYD has decided to support the dealer network with 90 days free period, which is a huge investment in terms of working capital that no other OEM is willing to do. But this is providing dealers in Europe the confidence that BYD is here for the long run, and that BYD is putting skin in the game. It's not just asking dealers, hey, give me your money and run the business. Is investing together with them. That's a huge difference. Yeah. And of course, when you move to the way in which the pricing is handled, differently from other Chinese brands, BYD doesn't want to be perceived as the the cheapest brand in the market. We don't care. We are not that kind of company. We do have a technology to defend, a technology image to defend, which cannot be associated with being the cheapest brand in the market. And of course, this provides some latitude in terms of margin structure, which is the reason why we can afford to have so many cars, so many products in the market and under development today. So there are fundamental differences from BYD compared to all the other Chinese car companies and with the European ones.
And do you feel that in Europe your main challenge is European brands, or also? Definitely.
We are this market is a jungle, has always been, by the way, and we want to fight to get our share of this market, an important share of this market going forward. We are not doing all this to be a 1% player in the market. That's not the reason why we're here today.
And Mr. Altavilla, do you think the other companies and automotive brands are weak now, so that BYD can develop more rapidly and efficiently?
That's a very good question, and the answer is absolutely yes. I would say that with the exception of Toyota and Hyundai, any other OEM in the world today is not just weak, but is scared to death of how the future could look like 5 years from now. And this is an incredible opportunity for a brand, for a company like BYD, which has got enough money to sustain the kind of development that we're implementing and have the ability to move at a much higher speed than any other OEM. So the answer to your question is yes. The reason why we will be getting a significant market share in Europe, as we're getting in Latin America, is because we can move faster than anybody else. Okay. Because others are very much concerned about whether they're going to be alive 5 years from now.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the start of the interview that this was once in a lifetime experience. And do you think you've already reached a level in your career that you felt fully accomplished, or you're always searching for a new challenge?
Never ever. I do hope that the day before passing away, I will still think that I'm just 50% done.
Yeah, I think also maybe tagging on to Elio, like we were talking earlier about maybe us as university students, we're always like, oh, like when I make this position, I'll think,
Yeah.
okay, I've made it, or when I do this, and it's never,
Ne-
you're
never,
never there.
never, never. If you're truly ambitious, you're never done. You will always be seeking for the next challenge to come. Retirement, look, for people who truly want to invest in its own career, like the people that decide to get a degree at Bocconi University, retirement is not a state of mind. It will never come. You will always be eager for something to do and for something that will make yourself proud of contributing to the growth of a country, to the growth of a company, to the growth of an organization. But you should never feel the sense of I made it.
Thank
I
you.
mean, yeah, that makes sense. What about maybe your experience? You talk about contributing to the health of maybe like a country as well, and I know you were quite involved with some heavy negotiations with governments and with the Obama administration back in the crisis. Maybe you want to give us a bit of insight into that. What was it like? What kind of experience?
There was a from a personal and a managerial standpoint, it was a wonderful experience. Now you need to go back to 2009, where the automotive industry in the U.S. was in a state of disrepair, and when President Obama decided to appoint the so-called car czar, who was an individual, Steve Ratner, together with Ron Bloom, that were designed to handle the potential resurrection of GM and Chrysler from Chapter 11. There was no certainty that this process could ever been successful. Then the negotiation with the administration was intense, was tough, also because President Obama decided that GM was too big to fail, to use a famous sentence, and so decided to inject 50 billion worth of equity into the company. Chrysler was much smaller than General Motors, and there was very little certainty around the destiny of Chrysler. And so after a long, intense, and difficult negotiation, we got, as Fiat Chrysler, the possibility to get 7.5 billion debt at very high interest rate, an interest rate that my former boss at the time defined as a shyster rate, to help getting Chrysler out of Chapter 11. The next 3 years were an incredible experience in resurrecting this company, and I have to tell you that the one thing that I learned and I will never forget is that we did all this relying entirely on the American management team, not the existing one. We sent everybody home. I fired more people in the first 60 days as board member of Chrysler than I did in my life. But we identified a lot of number 2 and number 3s that were sitting in the rankings of the company, but were driven by a tremendous ambition to make their company successful again. We did all the, when a lot of people has always asked me, how many Italians rescue Chrysler? And the answer is fundamentally, there were 3 people. Mr. Marchione, who became the CEO of the company, I was in the board with him, and we brought the head of communication. A few months later, we asked an English guy who was the CFO in Europe to become the CFO of Chrysler as well in the US. There was nobody else. Everybody else was American or was a Chrysler employee. And only many years later, when the integration became complete, then we start trading people between Europe, Latin America, and US. So I got American people in my team in Europe, and there were Italians in the US. But at the beginning, the real recipe for success was to rely on the management team that was there.
Wow. Maybe biggest challenge you've had to face so far then, or
That was really one of a kind.
And Mr. Altavilla, what was your experience in China compared to the one in the US?
Well, number one, I was appointed head of Fiat China February 1995. At the time, the Chinese car market was made of less than 500,000 cars per year. Now, the Chinese market is worth 30 million a year. So, we are, I mean, it's not even remotely comparable. But it was an incredibly experience for me because I had to learn a completely different culture. And at that time, the Chinese government has just started looking at the establishment of Sino-foreign joint ventures in the car business. And so I lived 4 years in China, in Beijing. And in those 4 years, I had to set up a dealer network in China and in Hong Kong, find a partner for a joint venture, and set up a plant in Nanjing. And that was a very good accomplishment. I think that those years in China helped me understanding how important it is to have a direct and transparent relationship with the local government. I mean, in China at the time, you had the zero chance to run a business without strong involvement from the Chinese government, the so-called State Planning Commission. I had to learn how to handle those relationships. Was not easy because, I mean, as an Italian, as a European, we are used to a completely different behavior, but it was an incredibly important lesson to learn. At the end, it paid back because in my life I have set up 9 joint ventures in China. I also had to unwind 5 joint ventures, so I got some experience in doing deals in China.
And at that time, would you have thought it would turn out like this in the market today about automotives and EV?
I mean, I would lie completely if I said yes. I mean, clearly, it was easy to foresee at the time that the Chinese market would have become one of the most important in the world, but I don't think that there was nobody there who would have bet $10 that the Chinese market would have been 30 million units a year, and that an important technology like EVs or NEVs would have fundamentally been developed first in China before anywhere else in the world. So I think that in that respect, China did gigantic steps in the last 10 to 15 years.
of course. Maybe let's just end on like a bit of a quicker note on maybe what maybe are three things you kind of wish you knew sooner in your career, or some pieces of advice you'd like to share regarding maybe specifically your experience as a manager as well.
Look, the piece of advice is that if you decide really to embrace this career, you need to be serious. Which means that you need to challenge yourself and get out of the comfort zone as soon as you feel that you have reached the comfort zone. Which is very easy to state in front of this microphone. But trust me, it's going to be the most difficult decision that any of you would actually do in his or her life. Because number one, it's not easy to realize I'm now in a comfort zone. And number two, it's very difficult to say, you know what, I need to move the sandbox somewhere else. But there's no other way of making really a good career, regardless whether you're going to be in finance and industry, in tech, in pharma, doesn't matter. But if you truly want to be somebody who make a difference, you need to be prepared to rethink your life, your career, several times during your life.
Of course. And maybe just a question on like maybe your managerial style. Do you usually start off with, would you, let's say, prefer kind of having a rough idea of where you want to end and have like an end goal and kind of just start? Or do you prefer having kind of everything singularly planned out and then put it in action, if that makes sense?
No. That would require way too much time before starting the action. Of course, anything you start, whether it's a new project, whether it's a new job, whether it's a new company, of course you need to have clear in your mind what is the ultimate objective you want to reach. But then you need to keep the flexibility of adjusting and adapting to the different conditions that you find. The most important thing is to set up the best possible team. That is the most important activity that any manager need to do, which is very difficult sometimes. I mean, it's good to hire smart people, but at the same time you need to have the courage to fire the ones that are not helpful, which does not mean that the people you're firing are stupid, are idiots, or are incompetent. They just don't fit with the ultimate objective that you have in mind. Then they might become incredibly successful somewhere else. So you always need to respect your people, whether they remain with you or not. But setting up the best possible team is job number one. And then, of course, once you have the right team around, things will unfold much easier.
Sorry.
Thank you. And what do you think is the main and the most important thing about setting up a team?
Well, the answer to your question might require 30 minutes. Number one, I only like people who are willing to challenge the status quo. I want people around me that come to my office and tell me, you know what, tonight I thought that there could be a different way to accomplish what we need to accomplish. That is the kind of attitude I need. I hate people who keep on repeating always the same framework. Number two, you need to be, or at least my people need to be fast learner, and at the same time they need to be able to make tough decisions, and they shouldn't be afraid of sometimes making tough calls. But the most important thing is the level of ambition that you got.
Okay, thank you very much.
That is the one thing that on which I cannot compromise. If I need to see in your eyes that you have the ambition to turn the world upside down. If you don't have that ambition, we're wasting our time.
And do you think that sometimes ambition maybe could drive someone out of the target?
This is what your role as a manager is all about.
Okay.
You need to coach people to be aggressive, to be innovative, but it's up to the leader to keep everybody
Okay.
in the boundaries of the normal behavior.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect note to end on, unless you have maybe some final words to share or.
Keep on buying BYD cars.
Fair enough. All right, thank you, and we'll see you on another episode of our coffee chat. We also like to thank Radio Bocconi for having us today, and of course, Mr. Altavilla for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much for your time.
It's been a pleasure, and happy Chinese New Year to all the Chinese friends that are listening to this call.